Well, hello again, guys, from here inside the City Ground, where it's awfully quiet now. It wasn't like that just over an hour ago, where I'm sat up in the press box there trying to file my report, and all I can hear is, "You only cost 40 million, so much so I just put it in my report. I committed the words to print," which you can read below the line, by the way. But yeah, today, another Newcastle victory, a third on the spin, and yet more evidence that the key to Newcastle's future going forward this season is to delve into the past. Another performance, certainly in the second half there, that was reminiscent of everything that was brilliant about them 2 seasons ago. And it's the question I've just asked of Eddie Howe downstairs there. And by the way, Eddie said, good question. And this is how it went. I said, for all of you who've spoken the last couple of years about wanting to evolve into a passing team, a team with a more possession-based focus, who was in control of its destiny, is there not an acceptance that your strengths, evidenced by the second and third goal here today, that you are better on the break, playing to those qualities, that transition where Newcastle were devastating? Nuno Espirito Santo admitted to us that Newcastle had done to them what Forest have done to other teams this season, as that was by playing on the counter-attack, good players punishing that space. Newcastle were fantastic, superb, fabulous, whatever superlative you want to attach to that second half performance. It was right up there with the best they've produced this season. But in a roundabout way, I'm going to get back to this. What did Eddie say after he said yes? Good question. He said yes, it's something we have debated internally, that while there is that want and perhaps that need to be a very top team to control games more than Newcastle do in terms of when they actually have the football, he said you can't move away from your strengths, from your skill set. And for Newcastle to be the team that they perhaps want to be, first and foremost, they've got to be better with the ball. And right now, they're not really. And if we go back to the first half here, now, we were debating at half-time, had Newcastle played well in the first half or had they not? I was more in the camp of the latter, but only because, yes, they'd had a lot of the ball. If you'd said which team had been the better team, you probably would have said Newcastle. It was certainly a case of the game was there to win. We all agreed on that at half-time. It wasn't if Newcastle were playing terribly, but the reason I said I was disappointed with them was because they had a lot of the ball and hadn't really done a great deal with it. They hadn't made enough forward passes. A lot of that possession was slow, and they were playing in front of Forest. Yes, Joe Willock, I thought, was the standout player in that first half, by some distance. He got in behind once or twice there down the left, but that final ball, that final cross, that execution wasn't really quite there. And for all Newcastle had been okay in the first half, I still left during the break with the opinion that overall it was disappointing. They trailed by a goal, having probably been slightly the better team, but they came out in the second half and wow, wasn't it entirely different? And it was almost inevitable from the start of the second half, incredibly well inside the first 2 minutes, and they just set up camp there in Forest's half, and there was just that, like I say, that inevitability that the turnaround was coming. And you probably haven't felt like that really with Newcastle. Games where they have come back into it, and they have done it very well this season in terms of coming behind from losing positions. I think that's about 10 points they've gained from that now, but it's been more existent in moments. You remember the game down at Wolves when they didn't play well at all, but they have the 2 brilliant moments. That there today in the second half was more sustained. There was far more confidence, and you had that feeling that they were going to come back into it. And in part that was built on the first half, like you say, when they were the better team, but they just stepped it up a gear. And the goals eventually came, well, incredibly, the first one from a set piece. I don't know, you guys will know the numbers. I'd actually lost count. It was certainly more than 60, approaching 70, I think, since the last time Newcastle had scored from a corner. It's hoisted in by Anthony Gordon. It drops down. Alexander Isak turns it in. Then the 2 goals that win it for Newcastle, on the break, incisive, ruthless. It was another Ryan Yates foul, believe it or not. Quite how he wasn't booked inside that first half is astonishing, really. It's a Ryan Yates foul. Anthony Taylor, for once, he gets it right this time. It wasn't his best afternoon, was it? Thankfully, in the end, for Newcastle, that didn't really have a say in the result, but he allows play to continue. Tonali slips it to Isak. Isak plays it wide to Joelinton. He's got gallons of space in front of him. He attacks it, and for once on the ball, we don't always say this about Joelinton, but he looked in control. He looked calm. He looked assured. He gets to the edge of the box, drops a shoulder, drops the defender on his backside, and then drops it inside the far post. It was just a brilliant, brilliant goal. That's 2-1. And then the third goal, again, another break. Sandro Tonali's involved. He came on, and the game was opened up. And crucially with Tonali, and this is what I do like him for, he passes forward. Newcastle didn't do that enough in the first half. A lot of it was sideways and backwards, and they didn't really have that incision. But Tonali, with that space to exploit, he does it. It's the pass forward, and it then goes wide, doesn't it? Harvey Barnes, and when Harvey Barnes gets in that position, you just know what he's going to do. He's going to cut back in onto his right foot and try and find the back of the net, and that is duly what he did. And again, you know, Tonali and Barnes, when you looked at the team sheet before the game, some might argue Tonali especially should have been in, others might say, why is there not a place for Harvey Barnes? But having those two to bring off the bench won the game here for Newcastle, certainly aided them in winning the game. And with Barnes, Tonali, I think there's more debate over time if you've got to find a way to get him in the team. But certainly with Barnes, for now, and the player himself might not want to hear this, but he is better as an impact sub. He's shown that this season. And the problem you've got when you start Harvey Barnes is you can't bring him on. But he's come on and he's done that job there. And that is 3-1. And again, you know, even at 1-0, there was that feeling that Newcastle were still going to win this. And wasn't it, wow, a thoroughly deserved 3 points. Now, the problem Newcastle had in the first half was that Forest's tactic almost was let Newcastle have the ball because they were safe in the knowledge that at some point Newcastle would give it back to them. And Forest's opening goal came from one such moment where Newcastle committed bodies forward. They had Tino Livramento high on the right. The guys on the left were supporting in expectation of Livramento getting the ball and then something developing. And Fabian Schär gave the ball away with a loose pass, really. From that moment on, it was 90 seconds before Murillo eventually scores. And I know there's a controversial corner, there's a free kick given away, but this was what Eddie touched on afterwards. If they're going to be that team with the ball, they've got to be better with it. And this has been a theme of the season, really. Going back into last season, there still is that little infuriation when Newcastle do give the ball away cheaply. And they did it a lot here again today, especially in the first half. You know, the Schär pass, you might think it's harsh to label that, but I think you do have to go back to the source of the momentum of that passage changing. Forest score from the set piece when Murillo journeys through about 2 zones of Newcastle's zonal marking. He needed an all-day pass for the amount of zones he got through. He gets away from Isak, I think it is. He eventually gets in front of Joelinton, flashes the header in, and Newcastle from set pieces, if we're going to pick on areas where they can improve, we've already touched on there, you know, scoring goals from set pieces, and the delivery today in the first half was poor, and no matter who it was who was delivering, Lewis Hall, Anthony Gordon, you know, even when Tonali came on, he had 1 or 2. I think they've still got to improve massively in that department. In defending set pieces as well, you know, Forest had a free kick inside the first couple of minutes and Newcastle looked a little bit shaky on that. It is an area where we know how important it is in the modern game today, where Newcastle can be better for me, because now it looks as if the overall performance around that, you know, that is improving, that is getting back to where it was and where it needs to be. It would be a shame if set pieces did let them down. I think that is something they really do have to look at. And also in that first half, we saw Anthony Gordon on the right, and he just didn't look himself at all, really, did he? We were talking amongst ourselves in the press box, and there was the game down at Fulham, there was Bournemouth as well, when Gordon's, you know, body language is something you guys have picked up on, and I think he is such an honest, genuine guy, and you know, I've got all the time in the world from him. I love him to bits in terms of what he does on the pitch and off the pitch as well. I think he's a real, genuine, engaging character, but when he's not happy out there, and he didn't look happy in the first half, I think it becomes obvious at times. Now in the second half, he went to the left and Joelinton came to the right, and I've spent my pre-match video and all week writing about how the key to unlocking Newcastle's season is Joelinton back on the left wing there, and Eddie Howe's got to tell Anthony Gordon he's a right winger now and make it work. Well, I've just said to Eddie there, you know, actually Eddie is the solution. Joelinton on the right, and he did laugh at the question. He knows the debate which has been, you know, going on surrounding how do you get the best out of Newcastle's front three and Newcastle in general. Well, it's a different solution every week now, and what Eddie said in response was, you know, there are a number of positions these players can play. He cannot be wedded to just, right, it's Gordon on the left, it's Joelinton on the right. Just within the game there today, there was even a brief 2-minute spell in the first half where they switched as well. So he's got to be more fluid and more adaptable to that. But to answer the question that it's something one or two of you have put to me below the line in the preview video, why can't Joelinton go to the right? Well, my reasoning for that was you've got the link up with Joe Willock down the left, and that is so important to keeping Joelinton providing that cover and that support to Lewis Hall, a young fullback. Well, Joelinton goes to the right, and yeah, he looks like he can play there, and never did we think he would cut inside and score on his right foot, never mind his left foot. But when he's had big chances this season, remember Southampton on the opening day and that one again there, well, all of a sudden, doesn't matter whether he's on the left or the right, he's actually finishing like a centre forward, the player who Newcastle originally paid that £40 million for. But we know that his game away from that, the goals are a bonus, because what he brings apart from that, and I've always said when Joelinton plays well, Newcastle play well, and I thought he was just outstanding there today. And certainly in the second half, you talk about certain players setting the tone. He did that, and Eddie Howe afterwards called him a beast. He called him a machine. He called him amazing. He called him gold dust. You know, Eddie was writing our copy for us, and I would go along with all of that, which might just take us on to the merit marks. Right, okay, and again, guys, I'm not going to fudge this. I'm just going to pick 3 players, a 1, 2, 3. And in ascending order, 1 star goes to Joe Willock. I just thought in the first half when Newcastle were doing okay but were struggling, he was the one who really tried to drag them out of that. He was bursting them behind, he was up, he was down, and given this is a player who was still probably feeling his way back to that level of fitness, I thought that was just so reassuring to see that energy and that aggression he had about him, and that continued into the second half. Yes, he went off when it was 1-1 and Tonali and Barnes came on, and the replacements helped to see home that victory. But I don't think you can ignore or forget what Willock had done in that first hour or so when others around him weren't quite at his level. I thought he was very good and is worthy of inclusion in this section. 2 stars, well, for all the noise there was around Chris Wood coming into this game and the brilliant scoring run he has been on, he was cut down to size by Dan Burn today. I thought Dan Burn was magnificent, and I've wrestled in my mind over whether Dan Burn was actually worthy of the 3 stars. I just thought he stood up tall, quite literally and metaphorically, against Wood, and everything Forest put forward. I thought he was there. At times he was up and down the pitch as well. There was one incident in the second half where I think it was Dominguez went through and Burn was there in almost a one-on-one with him. He was just so clever the way he shepherded him out wide, because there was a guy in behind Dan Burn as well, and it was just really smart the way he allowed the player to take the shot, but only from the narrowest of angles, and Nick Pope saves with his feet. And there was a couple of big headers there at the end. Even though it's 3-1, I didn't think Forest were going to get back into it. That was in part because of Dan Burn. So yeah, 2 stars for Burn. And the 3, well, there's no shock here, and that's Joelinton. It's for everything we've spoken about. Now, one thing I will disagree slightly with what Eddie said afterwards. He said every time Joelinton goes on a pitch, you know what you're going to get? Well, part of the problem is you didn't this season. Wonderful on the opening day against Southampton, then went completely off the boil after that. And after the Chelsea game, I said, you know, the defeat down at Stamford Bridge, you've got to get Joelinton out of the midfield, not out of the team. You've got to put him further up the field, back to the position where he probably was at his best during the Champions League qualification season. The last 3, he's played there, he's impacted, he's influenced others, and today that was his best yet out of the 3, and he's got the goal that set Newcastle on the way to victory. So if you've got a different take below the line, again, we said this thankfully the last few weeks, I've used this phrase, there's plenty of contenders, there's plenty of debate to be had around this. Tell me if you think differently, but yeah, Joelinton 3 stars all day long for me, even if I thought Dan Burn did push him close. Now, there are others as well who you might be screaming back are worthy of inclusion. Alexander Isak. Now, since all the talk about Isak and his slight reluctance to sign a new contract, Newcastle not being able to give him a new contract, and Eddie spoke about that and said, you know, if you want the big money or if you want to play in the Champions League, go out there on the pitch and show it and earn it. And of course he was talking to Isak in that regard. Well, since then, Alexander Isak has scored 4 and 4, and again there today that was another good, lively, busy all-round performance. So Isak is worthy of mention. Sean Longstaff in the midfield, the statistics, the run when he's in the team continues when Sean Longstaff plays. Newcastle win, those numbers are there. I thought he wasn't great in the first half. Second half, I thought he was very, very good. Again, you know, everything we've spoken about previously with Sean. Bruno Guimaraes, second half, another who stepped up. You can go throughout the team, really. The 2 fullbacks were a little bit quiet today, but Tino Livramento's run for Joelinton, supporting him, don't underestimate the impact that had in just taking away the defender. Lewis Hall, for once, I think it's the first time in about a month he hasn't featured in this section, but another solid showing. So there you go, guys. You can go through the team that is just that collective now coming back to form, led by a couple of really influential characters, and today it was Joelinton chief among them. And this just leaves the season now, having felt that it was, you know, in need of a life vest a couple of weeks ago. Newcastle were looking down rather than up, really, after that run of 5 without a win in the Premier League, to the backdrop of not really playing well, struggling to score goals, 1 or 2 little fitness issues. There are players looking, you're wondering when are they going to get back to their best level. Still with Anthony Gordon, he's gone off with a hip injury. He is now without to go away with England, rather. But if he doesn't go away with England, I don't think it might be the worst thing from a Newcastle perspective. But elsewhere, you know, Isak looking at his sharpest. Bruno, having started the season undoubtedly overweight, all of a sudden looks lean and energised and engaged. You can say that for so many of them. And you look at where the season can go from here, and it's Newcastle who are 1 point off Forest, and all of the talk around how brilliant Forest have been this season. There's only one of those two teams there today who will end up populating the top 4 come the end of the season, and it's the team who plays in black and white. And there's just so much more of a good feel, was the phrase Eddie used afterwards. And going into a break, now he said the break had come at the wrong time. I also think they've gone so hard and they've gone so well in the last 3 matches that actually, do you know what, a little 2 weeks just to take a time out and just to bask in that and just to enjoy that feel good. And when they come back, they've actually got a really favourable run of games. It's West Ham at home, Crystal Palace away, 2 games you would think on form Newcastle are more than capable of winning. That would then take them into that huge one against Liverpool under the lights on a Wednesday night at the start of December. And already, even 3 weeks out, whatever it is, what a night that promises to be. So a lot to come before then, guys. I'm away with England this week out in Greece, in Athens. So I'll post something where I'm going to ask for your questions. And the same as I did in Helsinki a few weeks back, I'll do a little bit of a Newcastle Q&A from the streets of Athens. But back then, it wasn't negative, it was realistic. I was saying where I thought Newcastle's season was at and some of the problems they had. Well, a lot of those have been identified, a lot of those issues have been solved. And here today, it felt like another example of a lot of that coming together. And in the second half, they've taken it to a different level again. That was probably their best away performance of the season. Not remove the word probably, that second half was their best away performance of the season by some distance. Please leave your thoughts below the line. Tell me about those merit stars, who you would have in there. And where does the season go from here now? What is the realistic aim? Is the top 4 back on? Looking at the last 3, I certainly wouldn't argue against it. So yeah, guys, I'll just give you a last little scan of the City ground. It's certainly been a happy enough place for Newcastle to come in recent seasons, hasn't it? So hit like, subscribe, comment. There's the thanks button. Please, all the interaction is absolutely brilliant. I really do appreciate it. I'm now off to catch a taxi up the Newark North Gate, hopefully via an off licence on the way as well. So yeah, certainly enjoy your beer editing this one. And I'll see you again in the week from the streets of Athens. Okay, take care, guys. Bye-bye.